Hey folks, Phil Gallagher of ThrabenU here for a quick Monster Train tutorial. I think a lot of people don't start their runs properly. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of information you can actually mine before you've even clicked on anything to start the run. You can gain a lot of information about what your run might look like and some of the problems and obstacles you might face. So I'm going to show you the things that I think about when I'm starting a run. Is geared at newer players, but veteran players, you might learn something. So I normally play on Covenant 25, but we're just going to drop down to something below Covenant 25 so I don't break my streak in resetting for this video. The game lets you know that you're supposed to do some thinking before you even start doing anything for the run. And it does that by showing you which Seraph variant you're going to be fighting. So we are fighting Seraph the Chaste, which is the Cleanse Seraph. So that's going to get rid of buffs and debuffs. Now, obviously you should be thinking things there like, oh, my lifesteal stacks or my regen stacks aren't going to be as good in this fight. But you can be thinking about a little bit more stuff. So if we take a look at the waves that are happening here, in the Cleanse Seraph fight, the scariest enemies are the Pyre Wings. Those are the ones that attack for 4 and Ember Drain you. So over the course of this run, you need to be thinking about how am I going to deal with Pyre Wings? Can I just deal 150 damage before they attack and I don't get Ember Drained? Do I take extra Ember so it doesn't matter if I get Ember Drained? These are the sorts of things that you should be thinking about. You should also be thinking about how do you make your backline units survive if they have less than 12 HP. This is most important when you are on a Stygian starting run and your Tethys is nice and squishy and is one of your primary damage dealers. Each Seraph fight asks you to do slightly different things. The hardest thing about the Cleanse Seraph fight is dealing with the Pyre Wings and dealing with your your buffs getting, destroyed. In this fight, you're only asked to do 3 damage to backline units, which is not particularly difficult. Many unupgraded cards, such as Vine Grasp, will just do that. Now, if we had Sap Seraph instead, we'd really need to be thinking about how do we do 5 damage every turn of the fight to a backline unit. Because if you don't do that 5 damage, your tank takes 30 damage. And if you look at the raw number of Shade Wings that are in this fight, it's pretty gross. Similarly, the Devour Seraph instead asks you to be able to do 10 damage to backline units. Otherwise, the Purifiers start dealing you a whole bunch of damage to your back units. And the Spell Devourer Seraph asks you to deal with multiple Gilded Wings in a row. And that's maybe the trickiest thing about that fight. So, we are on this Cleanse Seraph with an Umbra Awoken start. Now I can evaluate my opening cards. Glimmer is a great starting card that helps with some backline stuff, although we would need to upgrade it if we want it to kill Lightwings in the final fight. The Mortal Trade is something that can help keep our champion alive in early floors and still be pretty useful later. And Gem Trove is something that we can't cast right now, so we'll want to be looking at getting a cost reduction on that in all likelihood. So beginning players, when they first start, they click on one of these 2 things, then they click on the other one, and then they go to fight 1. But you can actually scroll through and get a decent amount of information. The first thing I do is check which Daedalus and Fel variant I am going to get. Now let's make this a little bit bigger. The most important ones to check out are, do you have Double Barrel Daedalus, and do you have Scouring Crest Fel? These are the 2 that require you to prepare the most for the fight. If you don't prepare for Double Barrel Daedalus by having enough things that take care of the backline units, your tanks randomly end up taking 20 once or twice in that fight, and that sometimes kills you. Similarly, if you can't get rid of all of these blights that are in your deck, both from Fel and from the Absolvers or Purifiers in that fight, then you start to slip slowly and slowly closer towards taking a lot of pyre damage. So when I see this crest, I'm looking to take extra backline removal, even if it isn't great for the long game. And when I see this crest, I'm almost always taking Ember after the first boss, unless I have another way to kind of work around these sorts of effects. So I do that first scan. I am facing Double Barrel Daedalus, though in this combination, cards like Vine Grasp and Antumbra Assault will be even more valuable than normal. My starting glimmers feel really good. And I scroll down here, and wouldn't you know, I also have the fell that makes me want to take Ember. So right away I'm thinking, I'm taking Ember after Daedalus, and I need to draft cards that remove backline units more than normal. Okay, so that's step one. That's the first thing that I check at every run without fail. The next thing I do is take a look at the first few floors and get a feel for what my banner units are going to be like. This helps me make better choices with my artifacts and with my picks after the first floor. Generally speaking, now this isn't always true, but generally speaking, you end up going to the Merchant of Steel on Circle 2. That's because an upgraded unit makes Circle 2 so much easier, especially if you get a harder boss there. So with the way this run starts, I'm likely to take an Awoken Banner and a Merchant of Steel here. And then at the next floor, if I feel like I don't need any more units, I go left and I pick up an artifact. If I still need another unit, which in this run, a Gorger, seems like it would be great, I'll go right and pick up this banner. Planning out, at least preemptively, what these first 3 circles look like is going to drastically increase your success in the run. Then I usually take another 15 to 20 seconds and just kind of skim the rest of the act and get a feel for what it's like. I'm going to break it down a little more slowly than I normally do, but essentially what I'm looking for are how many removal nodes am I likely going to get in this run, and what are my ratios of my various merchants. If I realize that I'm going to have a billion opportunities to go to Merchant of Steels that are going to be good, that's a very different run than if most of my good options later on are Merchant of Magics. So continuing on and looking what we have here, this is an okay but not optimal Merchant of Steel. I would probably like to go this way and pick up these card removes and this Hellvent, but if this Gorger needs an upgrade and like that was a good hit, we might go to this Merchant of Steel, just so we don't have to go to another Merchant of Steel later. Notably, this Merchant of Steel and this... Sorry, that's a Merchant of Magic. Never mind. So this is kind of an Merchant of Steel. Since we aren't offered another Merchant of Steel here, now my thought is, yes, I'm going to probably have to use that to improve my unit. Now looking at this floor, if we've gone to a Merchant of Steel here, and a Merchant of Magic here, this is a flexible floor where you could probably go either way. Have something powerful, this is a great chance to duplicate it. This might especially be true if, say, you take Architect Penumbra and you're looking to really overfill a floor well. Moving forward, this is a pretty good side to be planning towards a Merchant of Trinkets. And looking towards the end of the run, this is probably a flexible floor, but probably ends up being a Merchant of Magic. Again, Unstable Vortex is one of the most valuable nodes on the map. And similarly, we're going to be offered the opportunity to get more removes here. So, charting through this act, pretty likely that I go right here, and then this floor is flexible. This floor is almost certainly right for card removes. This floor is almost certainly right for card removes, and this floor is almost certainly right for card removes. That means from this starting deck, I'm likely to remove 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 5, 6 cards. There's a world where we end up removing the Gem Trove if it's uncastable, but we're going to 2 Merchant of Magics in all likelihood, so we might not end up doing that. So this just gives you a feel. This is a pretty flexible set of paths that are going through. I feel good about the strength of this act. So now let's evaluate our artifact. Alright, you have the opportunity to get 7 Ember on the first turn of battle. This gives you a burst while you are setting up. Is there any reason why we might want initial bonus Ember? Yes, it looks like there is. So that's something that could be takeable. Notably, in this combination, really any combination that has Umbra, you do have a lot of expensive cards that cost usually 4. So you have the Gem Troves, and you have things like Excavation Eruption that are very expensive, that having an improved Firebox makes those cards better pickups. Will it make them castable throughout the entire fight? No, certainly not. In this run specifically, the other thing that an improved Firebox would do is help you play out the initial scourge that Fel gives you on floor 6. Cleansing Water is an unexciting upgrade, but generally speaking, it's good. Like, it's not run-defining by any means, but it does a lot of things, especially in early fights. In early fights, you might get a whole bunch of units that spawn with Rage, and Cleansing Water really decreases the amount of units that you would be taking. Given that we're playing an Umbro run that starts with a very good but very expensive card, and we're facing Fel, I would take Improved Firebox here. But I wouldn't fault anyone for going either way. Now we look at the champion that we're offered after all of that. Now, Monstrous Penumbra is very good with these immortal trades that we've been offered up early, and I'm generally on board with taking that here. So let's talk about Gluttonous Penumbra. Gluttonous Penumbra is pretty good when we have a little bit of extra morsel generation. This really only counts on turn 1. Why might we not want Gluttonous Penumbra here? We might not want that because on floor 3, we're very, very likely to take an Umbra Banner. And that Umbra Banner is pretty likely to go and give us a Gorge unit. Generally speaking, if you have some scaling resource, you want to only spend that on one floor. So you don't want to split regen stacks between 2 floors when you're playing Awoken. And you don't want to split things like lifesteal stacks and your Gorge units, your morsels between 2 different floors either. So I would be leaning towards taking the Monstrous Penumbra here so that I don't end up trying to fight and play Gorge things on multiple floors. This does mean that I might be looking to pick up a Capacity card at some point in this run, or I might be looking to pivot to Architect so that I don't have to take Capacity as a boss reward. My hope is that during this run, I could take Ember, followed by Card Draw, but there's some worlds where that's not true. Monstrous Penumbra, when fully upgraded, does take 6 slots, so you have to do something in the run to make sure that that becomes playable. Now, I spent 12 minutes explaining this run before I even, started a fight. Don't do that under normal circumstances. Under normal circumstances, you should take about 1 minute to evaluate your run. The most important things are that you're checking your Daedalus and Fel variants, so that you know whether you need to specifically prepare for something. And then you really need to check out circles 2 and 3 to do your initial planning, and then just get a very, very slight feel for what's going to happen in the rest of the run. You will drastically improve once you start doing these little things. There are some other things you can do to also improve your chances of winning the run. A great example is on floor 2, or any floor where you're offered a banner and a shop, click on the shop before you click on the banner. Then you can see what sort of upgrades are available before you pick your unit. You don't want to go and pick a defensive unit and then be offered all of the offensive things. Similarly, when you get to the last circle, click on both shops before you start spending your gold. You want to know what all of your options are before you make any decisions that you might regret later. And that's really what this video is about. Learn how to use the information available to you to help you succeed. All right, I hope that was useful to you. Have a great rest of the day.